Good day, my name is Christel from France de Klerk Independent Technical Analyst. Fatima wanted us to look at DRD. Now, a lot of people wanted to know where can they get back into gold. And Fatima, we can see that the share if we look at the highs of the candles, lower highs are visible, which tells us there are traders who have taken profit. However, DRD, and I want to go back to a line graph because you can see the action and the pattern of the graphs a lot better if I look at DRD's line graph. We can see every time the share rallied, it gave a pullback and then bounced again. And back in May 2020, again, gave a pullback and bounced again. And now the question is, will DRD do it again? And if I look at a line graph, it looks like it once, and it has given investors an opportunity to get in again. So above 14 Rand 32, that is a possible buy. Possible stop loss for DRD, I would use is 13 Rand 77. And the next strong resistance that needs to be overcome or can be used as a possible target for DRD is 16 Rand 32. Just take note, it has moved away from the 40-week moving average. It's disconnected completely from it, just continued to rally. But the graph looks positive at this stage. Only below 13 Rand 77 will DRD be a concern. Also take note, my stochastic is not in ideal territory. It's sitting here on a 61. We prefer it to be oversold below a 20 when we start to buy a share. But you can see that sometimes the stochastic pulls back into no man's land, and once that blue line, the K line, that smaller or shorter moving average, once that blue line breaks through your orange, the longer D line, that's confirmation, divergence of a possible turnaround despite not even being oversold. And you can use that maybe like you've seen here in the past, back at 42, it just turned around. Again in March 2020, turned around at around 43. And once those two lines break and confirm one another, that will be also confirmation that we can maybe see higher levels on DRD. Ishmael wanted to look at capital and counties. And I want to go back to a candle graph because there you can clearly see the profit taking that has taken place, Ishmael. Your first sign of strength would only be above 32 Rand 81. The share is nicely oversold, all right, but have a look there. Your two moving averages, the two lines within the stochastic is pointing downwards. That means the momentum to the bottom is still in place. The optimism will only be confirmed or implied once the two lines, the blue and the orange, started to point upwards. That is when you want to get in. And if you can combine that with a beautiful turnaround candle, a dragonfly tweezer bottom, something that can imply optimism, that would be an ideal place to enter. So my first sign of strength or possible buy entry level for capital and counties will be above 32 Rand 81. Above that level, we can maybe expect that the buyers would protect the share. But one thing that does concern me about this graph, Ishmael, is that the share continues to make lows. If I look at since about the 22nd of June, every week the lows are getting lower and lower. There was a little bit of optimism that week of the 3rd of August, but it just keeps on making lower lows on the lows of the candles, and that is seen as negative. So in order to make sure that you get at the right place, maybe wait for higher lows before you start to get in. 40-week moving average is far away. If the share can start to turn around at whichever level, and especially change 32 Rand 81 into a support, we might be sitting here with a possible cup and handle formation and more than one handle formation. But that is still early days. The share needs to find and at least turn around before we can imply that this is a possible cup and handle formation. Oliver wanted us to look at Barrick Gold. Newmont, Barrick Gold, all of these gold counters listed in the US market has given absolute massive rallies to the top. But at this stage, I am seeing two long upper shadows on candles. And that implies, Oliver, profit taking. It tells us that there were sellers who have started to take profit, and that normally implies that we can maybe see a turnaround on Barrick Gold. Also take note, like in the case with DRD and many of our other gold shares on our local exchange, profit taking has taken place. The share did retrace, but at some stage it found support again and rallied. So the big confirmation of weakness for Barrick Gold will be below $25.87. If $25.87 can change into a resistance, we might see a possible double top on Barrick Gold. And that will be confirmation of a turnaround that can easily take the share back to around $23 or even that 40-week moving average. Only when Barrick Gold starts to consolidate above 30 Rand 70 and especially above that high of 31 Rand 22, only above those levels can I assume again that the momentum to the top can continue. It's very toppish. You can see that the share has had a massive rally. I would not consider a short at this stage, but if you already have the share, maybe consider taking some of the profit off the table. And the big next resistance support that needs to change into resistance that will also act as confirmation of weakness would be below $22.89. And that is that trend line that I've drawn in there that has kept the momentum to the top in place since about the 13th of April. Jeff wanted us to look at Helmerich Payne, a company that drills oil, and we know, with the low demand and the OPEC issues, the oil price is under pressure, and we can see that as well in the company that drills for it. But there is a head and shoulder formation at the moment on Helmerich Payne, Jeff, that is a little bit of a concern. So the confirmation of that neckline will be there below $17.32, because that's when the confirmation of the neck and the head and shoulder formation will be on the table. Only when Helmerich starts to consolidate above $21.30 can I assume that the warning formation is off the table, and that can be a possible place for you to enter a buy opportunity if you are keen to accumulate the share. And the big resistance that needs to change into a support is waiting there at $28.94, because we can see that is the candle of the 8th of June. Strong resistance were found, and after that the share just plummeted back to levels of around $18. Obviously that red line, big resistance on this graph. If we look back, we could see in the past, in April 2019, back here in Feb and Jan of this year, and even in September 2018, every time Helmerich gets to the 40-week moving average, it changes into a resistance and then it plummets. So it will be very interesting to see this time what it does when it reaches that $27.84 level. So hopefully the share can start to consolidate above that $21.77 level and go back to the 40-week moving average. But that head and shoulder formation is still a possibility, and it shouldn't go below that neckline. Otherwise, that head and shoulder formation will be confirmed. Mo wanted us to look at the EURZAR currency pair. We know that we can clearly see, Mo, that the strong resistance on the euro against the rand is 20.90. Only when the rand starts to consolidate above 20 Rand 90 against the euro can we assume that the momentum, that the weakness will continue. And there is a possible, and because of that resistance around 2090, there is and I can maybe rather use this would be a stronger line that we can use as a possible support against this currency pair. Because if this level of around 18 Rand 69 changes into a resistance, then a possible double top will be on the table. And I want to draw this possible double top here because the rand weakened, it found resistance there around 2090, retraced, made a little bit of a blub there, a false whip saw, or a break is the right technical word for it, rose again weaker, found resistance, and should the rand strengthen against the euro and come back all the way to 1869, there is a possible double top formation on the table. And that strong level of that 1869 must hold. If that level changes into a resistance and the rand starts to consolidate below that level, the possible target for my rand against the euro is the length of the left leg projected up downwards from where the formation will be confirmed, which means my rand can go back to around 17.10 against the euro should that formation play out completely. Big test would be that 40-week moving average waiting at 18 Rand 32, Below that level, the long-term sentiment towards the euro would change to a negative again. Strong graph, I would be careful. It might become a possible double top, but only above 2090 can we assume that the weakness in the rand against the euro can continue. Kevin wanted us to look at the United States Oil Fund. Listed on ARCA, the ticker of this ETF is USO, and we can see that there is clear higher lows visible on this graph. Kevin, strong momentum to the top. It is very topish. I mean, trading at $30.66, but I want to zoom in there because I want to show you that this trend line has clearly changed into a support, and that is seen as positive. There is a beautiful gap on this graph that can act as a possible target for higher levels, and that window is waiting at $68.18. That low of that candle of the week of the 2nd of March is a possible gap that needs to be closed at some stage. It can take days, week, months, decades, but that gap needs to be closed, and that gap is between $68.80 and $58.64. But at that gap, a possible target. When will the USO ETF be a concern again? Below $25.50. Below $25.50, we might start to see lower highs, and that will change my opinion to this graph to a negative view. Please feel free to send through your questions for next week's show. Have a fantastic week. Take care.